Summer nights. They hold a certain kind of magic, don't they? A feeling of warmth and freedom, wrapped in the familiar chorus of crickets and the scent of freshly cut grass. These are the nights we wish would never end. But for some, the magic of a summer night curdles into something else. The familiar sounds are replaced by a chilling silence, the gentle breeze carries a whisper of warning, and the darkness. The darkness hides things we were never meant to see. Tonight, we're going to pull back the curtain on that idyllic summer dream. We have 3 stories for you, allegedly true accounts from people who looked into the warm summer darkness and found it staring back. These aren't tales of haunted houses or ancient curses. These are stories about moments when the ordinary world peeled back just enough to reveal the terrifying possibilities that lie beneath. So, turn down the lights and settle in. The summer night is long, and it has stories to tell. Story 1. The Scent of a Summer Storm. Our first story comes from a man named David, who was 16 years old in the summer of 1998. It was a summer like any other, defined by the oppressive, humid heat of the Midwest. The kind of heat that clings to your skin and makes the air feel heavy in your lungs. David's family lived in a quiet, comfortable house at the end of a cul-de-sac, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and nothing much ever happens. One sweltering July evening, a thunderstorm was brewing. The air was thick with the smell of rain on hot asphalt. David's parents had gone out for the evening, leaving him home alone with instructions to close the windows when the storm finally broke. He was in his room, trying to get the dial-up internet to connect, when he first noticed a smell. It wasn't the approaching rain. It was something else, something cloying and unpleasant, like meat left out too long in the sun. He assumed it was a neighbor's garbage can and thought little of it, managing to finally get online. An hour passed. The wind began to pick up, rattling the screen on his window. The smell was stronger now, so pungent it made his eyes water. It seemed to be coming from downstairs. Annoyed, David went to investigate. The ground floor was quiet. He checked the kitchen first, sniffing the sink and the trash can, but the source wasn't there. The odor was strongest near the back of the house, by the sliding glass door that led to the patio. It was here that his unease began to curdle into real fear. The vertical blinds were drawn, but through the thin slats, he could see the backyard illuminated by flashes of lightning. And in one of those flashes, he saw that the sliding door was open, just a crack. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he hadn't opened it. His heart hammered in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to get out of the house. But he was paralyzed. The smell was overpowering here, a gag-inducing stench of decay and something else. Something metallic and sharp. This wasn't just garbage. It was the smell of death. Another flash of lightning lit up the yard, and this time he saw the source. Lying on the patio, just a few feet from the door, was his family's golden retriever, Buster. Buster, who was supposed to be at a kennel while his parents were away. His body was still, and dark patches stained the concrete around him. And then he heard a soft, shuffling sound from the second floor. From the direction of his parents' bedroom. He wasn't alone. Whoever had done that to his dog was in the house with him. The storm broke then, a sudden, violent downpour, masking any other sounds. Forcing himself to move, David backed away from the sliding door, his eyes locked on the top of the stairs. He crept to the kitchen and grabbed the heaviest thing he could find, a cast iron skillet. He didn't know what he was going to do. Fight? Hide? His mind was a frantic mess. He crouched behind the kitchen island, his knuckles white on the handle of the skillet, listening. The house was silent again, save for the roar of the rain. Had he imagined it? Was the stress of what he saw outside making him hear things? No, a floorboard groaned again, closer this time, just outside his parents' room. Then, a voice. A low, guttural whisper that slid down the stairs and wrapped around him like a cold hand. It wasn't a language he could understand, but the tone was mocking, almost playful. David's blood ran cold. This was one of those creepy encounters you only hear about in stories, a true waking nightmare. He held his breath, praying they hadn't seen him. The whispering stopped. David risked a peek over the counter. A figure stood at the top of the stairs. It was tall and gaunt, silhouetted against the window on the landing. It wore a long, dark coat, despite the oppressive heat. Its head was cocked at an unnatural angle, as if listening to the storm. It started down the stairs, one slow, deliberate step at a time. It wasn't walking like a person. It moved with a strange, lilting gait, its limbs seeming to bend in ways they shouldn't. With every step, the putrid smell intensified. David squeezed his eyes shut, a silent plea on his lips. When he opened them again, the figure was gone. The bottom of the stairs was empty. The living room was empty. A wave of dizzying relief washed over him, so potent it almost made him drop the skillet. Had it left? He stayed hidden for what felt like an eternity before daring to move. He had to call the police. He scrambled for the phone on the kitchen wall, his fingers fumbling with the buttons. The line was dead. A fresh wave of panic hit him. As he hung up the phone, he saw it. The back door, the main door to the house, was wide open, the screen door swinging gently in the storm's wind. And on the floor, leading out into the rain-swept darkness, was a trail of wet, muddy footprints. But they weren't coming in. They were going out, and they weren't alone. Next to them, smaller and fainter, was a second set of prints. His prints from when he had come in earlier. The figure hadn't just been in the house. It had followed him. It had been watching him the whole time. David spent the rest of the night huddled in a closet with the skillet, not making a sound until he saw the comforting red and blue lights of his parents' returning car slice through the windows. The police found no one and no explanation for the dead phone line. The incident was logged as a possible break-in, a tragic but ultimately random act of animal cruelty. But David knows what he saw. A being that moved like a broken marionette and smelled of the grave, that had slipped into his home on the back of a summer storm. He never felt safe in that house again. Story 2. The Firefly Watcher. Our second story is about the fear of isolation and how the safest place on earth can become a cage. It comes from a woman named Clara, who in 2012 bought a small, secluded cabin in the mountains of North Carolina. It was her dream, a quiet place to escape the noise of the city, surrounded by nature. The cabin was bordered by a thick, ancient forest, and her nearest neighbor was over 2 miles away. In the beginning, this solitude was a comfort. Her favorite part of the summer evenings was watching the fireflies. Hundreds of them would rise from the tall grass at the edge of her property, creating a silent, magical light show. For the first month, it was bliss. Then, one warm August night, she noticed something odd. Among the drifting, blinking yellow lights of the fireflies, there was another light. This one was different. It was pale green, almost white, and it didn't blink. It held steady, and it didn't move. It was positioned at the edge of the woods, about 50 yards from her porch, hovering at about eye level. Curious, she grabbed a pair of binoculars. When she focused on the light, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't a single light. It was two. Two small, perfectly round, unblinking pinpricks of pale green light, side by side. They were eyes, and they were watching her. She lowered the binoculars, her heart beginning to race. She tried to reason with herself. It was an owl, perhaps, or some other nocturnal animal. But no owl she had ever seen had eyes that glowed with their own internal light. And no animal she knew of would stare so intently, so unnervingly still, for so long. She went inside, locked the door, and told herself she was being foolish. The next night, She sat on her porch with a glass of wine, trying to pretend everything was normal. As dusk fell, the fireflies rose again, and so did the two green lights. They were in the same spot, watching. This time, fear began to gnaw at her. This wasn't a coincidence. This continued for a week. Every single night, as the sun went down, the watcher would appear. It never moved. It never made a sound. It just watched. Clara stopped going out on her porch. She started keeping her blinds closed at night, but she always knew it was there. Its presence was a weight, a constant, silent pressure on the walls of her little cabin. The isolation she had once cherished now felt like a trap. One night, after a particularly stressful day, she decided she'd had enough. Bolstered by a mix of fear and frustration, she grabbed the most powerful flashlight she owned, flung open her front door, and marched out onto the porch. "Who's there?" she yelled, her voice trembling but loud. "I have a gun. I've called the police." She aimed the flashlight at the tree line and flicked it on. The powerful beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the trees where the eyes always were. There was nothing there. No animal, no person. And the two green lights were gone. A wave of relief, followed by profound confusion, washed over her. Had she imagined the whole thing? Was the loneliness finally getting to her? She stood there for a long moment, sweeping the light back and forth before finally giving up and going back inside, feeling foolish but relieved. She locked the door, walked into her living room, and turned around. And her blood turned to ice. There, on the other side of her large picture window, were the two green lights. They weren't 50 yards away at the tree line. They were less than 5 feet from her, hovering in the darkness just outside the glass. And they weren't small pinpricks anymore. They were the size of dinner plates. This was the epitome of unexplained phenomena. She didn't scream. The sound was trapped in her throat. She could see now that the eyes were attached to a shape, a tall, spindly silhouette that blocked out the stars. Its head was long and narrow, and it was tilted, as if in curiosity, just as the thing on the stairs had been in our first story. It had been waiting for her to come back inside. It had let her think she was safe. Clara ran. She didn't grab anything. She scrambled out the back door, got into her car, and drove. She didn't stop until she reached the fluorescent-lit safety of a 24-hour gas station 30 miles away. She sold the cabin a month later without ever going back. She has no idea what was watching her from the woods on those summer nights, but she knows one thing for sure. It was real, and it was waiting. Story 3. The Lake's Echo. Our final story takes place at a location synonymous with summer, a lake. For 4 college friends, Mark, Sarah, Ben, and Chloe, their annual camping trip to Lake Monroe was a sacred tradition. It was a chance to decompress after final exams, a week of swimming, campfires, and cheap beer. The summer of 2016 started no differently. They chose their usual secluded spot, a small clearing right on the water's edge, far from the main campsite. The first night was perfect. They built a roaring fire, told stories, and watched the stars come out over the glassy, black water. Around midnight, when the fire had burned down to glowing embers, they heard it. A voice. A woman's voice, singing. It was faint, carrying across the water from the opposite shore, which was over a mile away. The melody was haunting and sad, a simple, repetitive lullaby. They were confused. The other side of the lake was undeveloped state forest. There were no houses, no campsites. Probably just some other campers, Ben said, breaking the silence, though he didn't sound convinced. The singing continued for another 10 minutes before fading away, leaving an uncomfortable quiet in its place. They tried to laugh it off, but the mood was broken. They soon retired to their tents, the strange melody echoing in their minds. The next night, it happened again. Same time, Same sad, lonely song from across the water. This time, it felt different, closer, more distinct. They could almost make out the words, but they were in a language none of them recognized. Chloe, in particular, was spooked. She said the song made her feel an intense, inexplicable sadness, as if she were mourning something she'd never lost. That night, no one slept well. They were all on edge, listening to every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, imagining shapes in the shadows beyond their tent walls. On the third day, a park ranger came by on a routine patrol. Desperate for a logical explanation, they asked him about the singing. The ranger's friendly demeanor vanished. His face became grim. He told them an old story, a local legend about a woman who had lost her child to the lake back in the 1930s. Driven mad with grief, she had walked into the water, singing her child's favorite lullaby, and was never seen again. Ranger, they say on still summer nights. The ranger said, his voice low, you can still hear her, looking for her baby. We get calls about it every year. My advice? Pack up and camp on the main grounds tonight. Some things are better left alone. The friends were terrified. The story had turned their creepy experience into something much more sinister. The legend was one thing, but the ranger's genuine fear was another. They decided to take his advice. They would pack up first thing in the morning and leave. They just had to get through one more night. That night, they huddled close to the fire, armed with flashlights, determined to stay awake until sunrise. Midnight came and went. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. There was no singing. A nervous relief began to settle over the group. Maybe, just maybe, it was over. It was around 3 a.m. when Ben, who was scanning the opposite shore with binoculars, suddenly gasped and lowered them, his face ashen. What is it? Sarah asked, her voice a tense whisper. There's a light over there, Ben stammered. Like a lantern. It's moving along the shoreline. Mark took the binoculars. He saw it too. A single, flickering yellow light, bobbing in the darkness across the lake. As he watched, the light stopped. It turned and began to move not along the shore, but across the water, directly towards them. And as it came, they heard the singing again. Not a faint echo from a mile away. It was clear, loud, and heartbreakingly close. And it was coming from the light. Panic erupted. They abandoned everything, their tents, their gear, their smoldering fire, and ran. They crashed blindly through the dark woods, the sound of the singing chasing them, getting louder and louder until it felt like it was right behind them, a cold breath on their necks. They didn't stop running until they burst out onto the main road, flagging down a passing car in a state of sheer terror. They never went back to Lake Monroe. They don't know what was crossing the lake for them that night, a grief-stricken ghost or something else the darkness had conjured up. But they had heard the lake's echo, and it was a song of sorrow they would never forget. 3 summer nights, 3 ordinary settings, 3 encounters with the inexplicable. These stories remind us that fear isn't always about what we can see, but the terrifying possibilities of what we can't. It's the sound you can't identify, the movement you glimpse at the edge of your vision, the chilling realization that you are not alone. The next time you find yourself enjoying a warm summer evening and the crickets suddenly fall silent, listen closely. You might just hear something else in the darkness. If these stories sent a chill down your spine, please let us know by hitting that like button. And for more tales of true horror, be sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. Until next time, stay safe.